Hello everyone and welcome back to another album review. In this video I'm going to review Remember Rainbow Bridge by Croatian Amor. Croatian Amor is an electronic producer who I've talked about some of their works in the past, but this is the first time that I'm actually kinda excited to share my thoughts with this brand new album over here, because when I did my first review out of a Croatian Amor album, it was for one that I didn't really care for. Isa was definitely one of my biggest disappointments and possibly my least favorite work from everything that I've heard out of Croatian Amor so far, and it was such a shame at the time because I really enjoyed some of the very first albums of Croatian Amor, where we would see some fascinating and pretty intriguing directions of minimal ambient music with a dark and sinister tone to it, and some really nice and simplistic ideas that were enough to make for some compelling results. Isa was an album that went into some kinda different directions, going into like ambient pop and glitch pop at times, which I don't think that they were that much properly executed. And not only that, after this point we also got numerous releases with Varg 2, which in my opinion they just felt kinda rushed, and after a certain point I stopped really caring that much about Croatian Amor releases. I didn't keep track with everything being put out because there was just so much material that felt more like quantity rather than quality after a certain point, so I wasn't particularly that much interested in new albums of Croatian Amor, but I decided to give this brand new album a chance, and I believe that this is sort of a return to form. This is an album that got me sort of excited after a pretty long time. In a few ways you can say that this album goes back to the roots, but at the end of the day we're talking about a new era and a new phase of Croatian Amor, having some of those ambient and glitch and IDM elements that you can find in Croatian Amor releases, but in this case it's done in a kinda more simplistic way, going into directions of ambient techno and ambient trance for the most part, which I believe make for quite a solid release at times. The execution seems pretty fine, and one of the nice things about this album is that if you are familiar with previous works of Croatian Amor, they would have this minimal synth and ambient approach, but it would feel a bit more dark, a bit more sinister and mysterious. On the other hand, Remember Rainbow Bridge feels more of like a calm and soothing album. The ambient directions over here feel more euphoric than ever before. It is actually an album whose ambience feels more cheerful and magical and having a more of a joyful approach, which is something that I appreciate, and I think that it's done in a nice way. So this album ends up paving a different path for the overall aesthetics of Croatian Amor. And even when it comes to the beats, while you might have a few directions of like IDM and glitch, like I said, for the most part we're talking about some pretty simplistic beats. There is not really something that is that much hard to follow or digest, because there have been releases of Croatian Amor in the past that could have felt really confusing, and while it's not as simplistic or as minimal as some of the first releases, this one seems to have a pretty nice balance to it. And it's not just an album that you can enjoy as a Croatian Amor fan. This new phase is actually a quite good starting point. If you want a sort of catchy album with a nice and beautiful atmosphere to it, being kinda chill and ambient, then I believe that this album contains quite a few elements that can be to your liking. Now the thing is though that the more I would listen to this release, I didn't actually feel that much captivated in comparison to the very first listen. I think it's because when I first listened to this album, I was just really pleased that I got an album out of Croatian Amor in particular that felt quite good in comparison to previous works. But if you take this as a general release, there is not really something that much special or significant about it. For the most part, this is an album that gets the job well done, but it stays as a well done job. It's not something that is exceptionally well done. And the thing is that when I listen to the tracks again, the main ones that I would consider highlights didn't really justify themselves that greatly as being highlights of the album. Don't get me wrong, I still believe that they're the best moments the album provides. However, they didn't really manage to grow more on me. Instead, some of their flawed parts ended up shining a bit more. And when it comes to tracks that I wasn't particularly that much interested in, they didn't really manage to captivate me even further. As an overall experience though, the album was still pretty soothing and pleasing to sit through in its entirety, even upon further listens. Now what I would consider some highlights out of this album are the very first track, which in my opinion feels like a really solid introduction into this new era of Croatian Amor. I like many aspects about this track, but at the end of the day, it still feels more of like an introduction or something that's about to come. It's not really that much of a fully developed song, which then leads us to the self-titled track Remember Rainbow Bridge, which in my opinion, this is the track that contains the greatest ideas when it comes to melodies. This is a really powerful and solid track on what it does. However, the thing that didn't really make me appreciate this track is that I feel that it becomes unnecessarily confusing when it comes to the melody and the way it shifts it towards many sections, which I think it feels kinda unnecessary. If it was just a straightforward minimal track, I think that it would work much better as a soothing and calm experience, because this just makes things a bit more confusing and it doesn't really help you keeping track with the pacing of the song, which in my opinion slightly takes away from the experience, but still it is an excellent song when it comes to the melodies and the idea behind it with the pitch and the overall sounds. The track that ended up feeling the most polished in my opinion was worth the Contender. This track really showcased better than anything else in the album for me the new direction of Croatian Amor and the way he could just use the atmosphere, the ambience and the beats in a way that makes for a pretty solid experience overall. The more minimal approaches of Ambient with tracks like the third and the seventh one ended up working quite in its favor in my opinion, making for some pretty soothing moments that I feel that worked pretty well with the rest of the album, and its overall structure and pacing. They might feel more filler compared to other moments, but they certainly were not out of place, and I still believe that they've got something to serve in the overall experience. Now obviously the track listing has its shortcomings as well. I didn't really enjoy the track Paper Birds for example. I believe it is the first moment after a quite engaging introduction where the album started being slightly uninteresting and uneventful, and it's something that I also saw with the track Cup of Humanity, which was a pretty short moment that has some pretty cool ideas here and there, but it wasn't really that much well developed in my opinion. And also So Long Morning Star serves as a quite nice minimal ambient song that serves as a quite calm and soothing finisher. In general, even if my opinion on this album is not as strong in comparison to the very first listen that I've had out of it, I still believe that this is some of the best material that we've heard from Croatian Amor in a really long time. I really enjoyed this new direction with the sound. I think that it works pretty nice and we get some greatly executed material. It might not have that much of a replayability to it, but it's certainly a standout album in the catalog and one of the most solid electronic releases I've heard this year so far. I'm gonna give Remember Rainbow Bridge a 7 out of 10. What's your opinion on this album? Like it, dislike it, why, and what do you want me to review next time? Let me know down in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.